So last week, Albania published the long-awaited and long-delayed results of its 2023 population census. As predicted, everyone on social media became an expert about demographics. All the TV channels have been flooded with debate and analysis of the results. But I wanted to bring to Inside Albania an overview of what the key data means, and also to understand a bit more about why certain results are controversial, why people don't necessarily trust all of the results, and what this data means in terms of Albania and its future. To make sense of the noise, to make sense of the data, and to cut through some of the controversy, I decided to speak to an expert. I am interviewing today Dr. Arjan Gjonça, an Associate Professor of Demographics at the London School of Economics. Welcome to Inside Albania. How has Albania's population changed over the last decade? We know from the results published that it fell by 14% in 11 years to 2.4 million. But has there been an increase in foreign residents? Within the people that are left, how many are old, how many are young? Can you explain a bit about, what's behind these numbers?
Thanks for the question. Albanian population has continued to decrease. The annual growth rate of decrease is even higher. It's about 0.13%. At the same time that it was 0.12% over the previous decade. This is for two reasons. A, because the natural increase has reduced, despite that it's not the main factor of reduction. The number of births in absolute number have gone down. And we had 2 years, one was COVID, that the deaths overpassed the births. But the main reason continues to be migration. The net migration in Albania is about 480,000 when you take into account the natural increase, which means on average in the last 12 years since the previous census, there have been about 41,000 Albanians that have immigrated every year as a net, accounting for the returnees as well. Compared to in the previous decade, as you mentioned, it used to be something like 48,000 a year. So while in absolute number, the migration has slightly slowed down, in demographic terms, we'll say that the trend has not changed at all. Albanians leave the country en masse. Regarding the composition of the population, there are a couple of things to mention. In terms of the foreign people coming, it's too early to publish to analyze the data, because these were the preliminary results, and we have got only about 5 days that we have the information, this data, so we haven't had much time to analyze them. But one thing that is extremely important to note is that Albanian population is aging faster than any other population in Europe. And that is not due to traditional factors such as long-term trends of low migration, but mainly what we called aging from the middle. So the population has aged because there aren't many people now in the taxpayers' age for the Albanian population in order to either pay as you go for the pensions or to look after in terms of social care and many more other elements that are related to age.
Now, in your view, are the figures relating to population size accurate? People have said these are not accurate figures, they've been over-reported, the real number is much less. But what do we know about this? Can we look at civil registry data? Can we look at other data that's publicly available? What is your view? Is the data accurate?
There is always a debate when the census comes in Albania. I've been involved in the last 3 during the period on democratic transition of Albania. And every time the data come, the opposition party tries to oppose, not accept the number, and always it's temporary. In the last census, I was as an EU expert advising the Institute of Statistics, and I remember that I was on the television trying to defend the data, that the data were accurate, when the opposition party, the party that is now in power, were opposing the numbers. Now that these data have come on the census of 2023, the opposition party that was in power in the last census is doing exactly the same, so is opposing the data. So more than anything else, I think it's a political issue. In terms of accuracy, there are two ways that we look at the data. The first way is that we look at the data from the methodology and process element of that. And the methodology has been modern. It's been within the standard of United Nations, UNFPA standards. It's been an international team in charge of the census. And the Instat itself has a tradition of good data collection. Just to mention one aspect of it, in 2001, when the Living Standard and Measurement Survey was organized for the first time in Albania, it was so accurate that the World Bank awarded it as the best survey of that particular decade in terms of organization and accuracy. So there is a tradition within the Institute of Statistics in Albania when it comes to accuracy of the data. What else can we say about that? For the first time, Albania used a CAPI system. So they had laptops with themselves or tablets, and the information was simultaneously, while being recorded in the tablets and going in the mainframe, in the main computer, where again in charge were the international experts, not the statistical institute in itself and any other people. So in respect to the process, it was that. More than anything, for the first time, we had the use of GIS, which was extremely important when it comes to identifying different places as well as empty households in order to be very accurate at the enumeration areas. We also had two questionnaires. There was the main one, the individual one, and the family one, and the household one. But also there was a small questionnaire, which was in order to ask questions to see the validation or the accuracy of the other question. That questionnaire also showed that it was pretty accurate. So in terms of the coefficients that came out, after the 1% post-census survey that we organized, which is a standard procedure in the whole world when censuses are organized, what we see is that we see a very small, very high coverage in the country, which is about 96.9, which is slightly higher than the previous census, but the margin of error is very, very small, smaller than in most developed countries, I would say, that we know. And the coefficient of refusal, the refusal rate is only 0.6%. It's unbelievably small. So in this respect, in terms of procedure methodology, it was accurate. We also have another way of checking the accuracy of the data, and that comes from users, from people like myself, the demographers, where we try to analyze the data. And the result of the census of 2.4 million was within our expectations. I mean, my estimate was that it was going to be between 2.4 million and 2.45 million population. While Instat, in its projection, it had it at 2.7 million because they haven't revised the assumption of immigration, which people like myself did based on the European data that were coming either on political asylums or on the number of immigrants in the countries based on their censuses of 2021. So I'm confident the data are accurate, but more data are coming, and when we do the analysis, we'll be able to tell more about it.
What about religion? Albania is a secular country, but the results show a majority who say that they are Muslim. However, this majority has fallen below 50% for the first time. Again, these figures have been disputed, and I myself am not completely convinced, because when I took part in the census, I really had to fight to write agnostic for them to note me down as agnostic. Do you feel that these figures relating to religion are accurate? And also, I want to ask, why is the topic of religion in terms of the population so controversial in Albania?
There are a couple of things about religion when it comes to data. Religion is difficult to be asked anywhere in the world. I remember when I teach my students the accuracy of self-declared data, I always give the experience of England and Wales census. I think it was 1991, when 4% of the population reported themselves as Jediah in a way that based on the Star Wars movie. So in that respect, religion and ethnicity by default are reported measurements where people tend to report whatever they have in mind. And in particular, religion in Albania is an issue that hasn't been a problem for a very long time. The two censuses cannot be compared because the question was asked in a different way in both the religion as well as ethnicity. But as it comes to religion, it's very difficult in the Albanian context to ask the question of religion when you have two generations that grew up without any religion education, where religion was prohibited, but the country is by default very, very tolerant in religion. It's named as an extremely tolerant society, where even in the small villages of about 400 households, you still have Muslim as well as Christian Orthodox or Christian Catholics. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. One of the interesting things is as you mentioned in your question about the agnostics or the atheists, I think one of the, I did have my arguments when the questionnaire was created for this census, and I asked the question of practice as one of the first questions to be asked when religion was being asked, if the person is religious and if they practice. Because Albanians, like in a lot of other cultures, say the religion of their surname or their ancestors rather than their own religion. And so in that respect, it creates this complication of what they are. The moment that you take the practice of, the country becomes pretty much very secular, as it is in their constitution. So I wouldn't interpret that the number of Muslims have gone down and the number of Christians have gone up and the number of different Protestant, well, the number of Protestants has increased because Albania has been opened in the last 30 years, so there have been quite a lot of different religions coming in the country. So I wouldn't worry too much. In terms of ethnicity, I think the census was pretty much accurate. Even the probe question came up with the same thing. For example, the largest minority that we have had in the country have been the Greek population. And if we leave what's been asked during this period and compare this with the last census under communism in 1989, for example, I remember that the number of Greeks or population declared as Greek population in 1989 was something like 56,000 people. And if you look at the number of Greeks in 2023 census, about 24,000 people, which is almost half of the population of Greeks in 1989, which coincides with the fact that half of the Albanian population, as it should have been without migration, has emigrated. So in a way, the percentage of are pretty much the same, because the reasons behind migration are the same. So it shows that even ethnicity, which is a very controversial issue to be asked, despite that it's a very homogeneous society, still the data was relatively accurate, not putting very accurate, because I do have issues with self-reported measurements.
Are there any other areas of concern with the census results? For example, minorities, Greek, Macedonian. I know that there have been comments from the minorities themselves, but also Greece and North Macedonia, and they've said that the results are not accurate, that they've been manipulated. Do you think this is the case? What reason would the government have to manipulate these results?
The example that I gave about the Greeks show pretty much the picture which most of the analysts, most of the demographers expect, in a way that this is. What has happened during the last 3 decades, as you mentioned, because a lot of Albanians went to Greece, changed their names, became from Muslim into Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, and the Greeks started to develop this concept that there are more Greeks in Albania than that we believe they are, or the statistics were telling us. In fact, now that there is a sense of Albanian identity among migrants anywhere in Greece or UK or Italy and United States, this thing has changed. And in a way, Albanians are not being declared now as Greek. Wherever they are, they're declared as Albanian. And even the Albanians that are in Albania, that they have their children, for example, there, they declare themselves as what they are. So there is no pressure about the pensions that they are getting from Greece or any other visas or things that would work as incentive to be declared other than what you are. So in that respect, this is all political. I think the Macedonian community, I might be wrong, has come out a bit higher than the previous census, and the Roma community has definitely come higher. And that shows a sense of freedom in declaring. The Roma community never declared themselves as Roma in the past. So this shows probably that there is a sense of identity among these communities in terms of declaring themselves in what they are, which I see it as a positive side in terms of minorities in Albania.
Arjan, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.